Imagine a city on the brink of destruction, thousands of lives hanging by a thread, and then against all odds, salvation arrives. But here's what history forgot. The person who saved them all was never mentioned in any chronicle, never celebrated in any parade, never remembered by those they rescued. This is the story of a hidden saint whose silent devotion literally saved thousands from certain death, yet whose name remains unknown to this day. What you're about to discover will change how you see faith, heroism, and the invisible power of prayer. Chapter 1. The Shadow of Oblivion. The year was 547 in the ancient city of Perugia, nestled in the heart of Italy. The Ostrogoth king Totila had surrounded the city with his barbaric armies, cutting off all supply routes. Week after week, the siege tightened like a noose around the throats of Perugia's starving citizens. Children cried for bread that didn't exist. Mothers watched their families waste away. The city's defenders grew weaker by the day, and everyone knew what awaited them when the walls finally fell. Massacre, enslavement, or worse. Bishop Herculanus stood as the city's last moral authority, but even his prayers seemed powerless against the brutal reality outside the gates. Historical records tell us that he attempted one desperate gambit, feeding the city's last lamb with their final sack of grain and parading it on the walls to deceive Totila into believing Perugia still had abundant provisions. But the barbarian king wasn't fooled. The deception failed, and the city fell. Herculanus was captured and brutally executed, his body thrown from the city walls he'd tried so desperately to protect. Yet here's where history gets fascinating. Centuries of devotion to Saint Herculanus never quite explained why his failed defense made him a saint. Why would the Catholic Church canonize someone whose plan didn't work? The answer lies not with Herculanus himself, but with someone else entirely. Someone whose actions during those dark days went completely unrecorded. And if you're enjoying this deep dive into forgotten Catholic history, hit that subscribe button because we uncover these hidden stories every week on Catholic Journey. What if the real miracle wasn't the bishop's strategy, but the faith of an unseen servant praying in the shadows? Chapter 2. Whispers of Devotion. While the city starved and soldiers prepared for their final stand, there existed in Perugia's darkest corners a life of extraordinary prayer. According to oral traditions preserved by Franciscan monks centuries later, a woman lived in near total obscurity within the city. Some accounts call her a widow, others a consecrated virgin. What all sources agree on is this: she never left her tiny dwelling, spending every waking hour in intercession for her city. Her devotion bordered on the supernatural. Neighbors reported seeing light emanating from her window at all hours, hearing whispered prayers that never ceased. She ate almost nothing, sustaining herself on scraps that others brought to her door. When people asked why she didn't flee before the siege began, she simply replied that God had stationed her there for a purpose. Her prayers, she insisted, were the city's true walls. This unnamed woman embodied what the early church fathers called the power of the hidden life. St. John Chrysostom once wrote that a single soul in perfect communion with God could save an entire city from divine wrath. The Desert Fathers spoke of hermits whose prayers held back invasions and plagues, yet whose names died with them. In 4th century Egypt, a Roman centurion supposedly asked a monk why the empire hadn't conquered more territory. The monk replied, "Because we are praying against you." The centurion laughed, not understanding that spiritual warfare often determines physical outcomes. During Perugia's siege, while Herculanus executed military strategy and diplomats negotiated, this woman fought a different battle. She wrestled with demons, interceded for mercy, and offered her own suffering as a sacrifice for her neighbors' lives. The ancient practice of spiritual substitution, where saints offer themselves in place of sinners, may have been precisely what she was doing in that dark room. But could one person's prayers really change the fate of thousands? The answer emerged only after the unthinkable happened. Chapter 3. The unseen turning point. When Perugia's walls were finally breached, Totila's armies poured into the streets like a flood of violence. Contemporary chronicles describe the barbarian king as merciless, having ordered the complete destruction of multiple Italian cities during his campaigns. His soldiers were authorized to slaughter civilians, burn buildings, and reduce Perugia to rubble as punishment for their resistance. Then something inexplicable occurred. Totila, known for his brutality, suddenly hesitated. Historical records show he gave an order that shocked his own commanders. Spare the city. Spare the civilians. Take only what provisions are needed and leave Perugia standing. Even more mysteriously, he ordered that Bishop Herculanus be executed quickly rather than suffer the prolonged torture he had originally commanded. Something had changed the barbarian king's heart at the critical moment. Was it political calculation? Military strategy? The historical record provides no rational explanation. Byzantine historians, who had every reason to attribute barbarian mercy to their own diplomatic efforts, admitted they couldn't explain Totila's uncharacteristic compassion. One chronicler wrote that the king seemed moved by unseen forces to show restraint. Meanwhile, in her tiny dwelling, the praying woman collapsed. Those who found her later that day reported she was barely conscious, having apparently fasted for the entire 40-day siege. Her last coherent words were a whisper of thanksgiving. "It is finished." Within hours, she died, her frail body finally giving out from the spiritual combat she'd endured. Perhaps a dozen people attended her burial in an unmarked grave. No one thought to record her name. She'd saved thousands and died anonymous. But the story doesn't end in that forgotten grave, because God never forgets his hidden saints, even when humanity does. Chapter 4. Echoes of impact decades past, then centuries. Perugia rebuilt and prospered, and the siege became a distant memory embellished by legend. Bishop Herculanus was canonized and became the city's patron saint, celebrated each year with processions and masses. His story was told and retold. The brave bishop who sacrificed himself for his people. Pilgrims came to venerate his relics. Churches were dedicated in his honor across Italy. But a Benedictine monk in the year 789 discovered something that changed everything. While cataloging ancient manuscripts in Perugia's archives, Brother Marcus found a letter written by one of the woman's neighbors just weeks after the siege ended. The letter, addressed to the neighbor's sister in Rome, described the mysterious praying woman and made an astounding claim. While our bishop fought with strategy and courage, it was the widow's prayers that held back God's judgment upon our city. We are alive because she died in our place. Brother Marcus spent the next 3 years investigating, interviewing the elderly residents who still remembered hearing stories from their grandparents about the praying widow of the siege. Multiple independent accounts emerged, all describing the same woman, the same unceasing intercession, the same mysterious death on the day the city was spared. Yet none could provide her name. She'd been too poor, too insignificant in social terms, for anyone to bother recording it. The monk presented his findings to the Bishop of Perugia, suggesting that the woman should be investigated for canonization. But there was a problem. Without a name, without documented miracles beyond the testimony of common people, the church couldn't proceed. The requirements for sainthood demanded evidence that simply didn't exist for someone so thoroughly forgotten. Brother Marcus died heartbroken, knowing he'd discovered a saint the church couldn't officially recognize. Yet heaven had already recognized her. And that's what ultimately matters, isn't it? The world may forget, but God never does. Chapter 5. Rediscovering the Saint. Stories like this aren't just ancient history, they're happening right now, in your city, maybe in your own neighborhood. How many unnamed intercessors are praying through the night while you sleep? How many elderly grandmothers are spiritually holding back disasters you'll never know were threatened? How many monastery chapels house monks and nuns whose prayers are literally sustaining civilization while the world scrolls past, unaware and ungrateful? Saint Therese of Lisieux called it the little way, the path of hidden sanctity that saves souls through small sacrifices. Mother Teresa said some of the greatest saints will never be canonized because they were too busy serving Christ in secret to leave evidence behind. Pope Francis regularly speaks about the saints next door, the ordinary people whose extraordinary faith changes everything without making headlines. If you want to dive deeper into these profound stories of hidden sanctity, check out our ebook, 50 Saints, Stories and Prayers for Divine Intervention, available in our store below. It features the lives and powerful prayers of both famous and forgotten saints whose intercession can transform your life today. The unnamed woman of Perugia represents countless others throughout history. The mother who prayed her wayward child back to faith, the factory worker who offered his suffering for his co-worker's conversion, the nurse who silently baptized dying patients, the teacher who prayed over her students' names every morning. These are the hidden saints, the unsung heroes of the kingdom of God. You might be one of them. Your faithfulness in obscurity might be holding back disasters you'll never know about. Your prayers in the darkness might be saving souls halfway around the world. The widow's example teaches us that the most powerful lives are often the most hidden, and the greatest victories are frequently won by people whose names history never records. Heaven sees what earth ignores. Eternity remembers what time forgets. Conclusion: no act of love is ever lost. Not a single prayer falls on deaf ears. Every sacrifice made in faith echoes through eternity, creating ripples that change destinies we cannot see. The woman of Perugia died without recognition, without honors, without even leaving behind a name. Yet her faith saved thousands of lives and inspired generations of believers who learned her story. She proved that you don't need fame, fortune, or recognition to change the world. You just need faith. So the next time you're tempted to think your prayers don't matter, remember her. Remember that somewhere in a forgotten corner of 6th century Italy, a woman nobody knew defeated an army nobody could stop. In heaven's eyes, even the unseen are celebrated. And sometimes, they save cities. If this story moved you, hit that like button and subscribe to Catholic Journey for more forgotten stories of faith that changed history. Share this video with someone who needs to know that their hidden faithfulness matters more than they could ever imagine. Until next time, may your hidden life shine bright in heaven.